And I'm disturbed about that.
It's wonderful.
Good morning, Madam President. We are recording.
This meeting is being recorded.
Thank you. And there's no special announcement this morning. Is that correct, Mr. Bravich?
There is with respect to call-in.
Okay.
So in accordance with AB 361, we will be conducting all public comment telephonically. Members of the public wishing to offer public comment may do so by calling 310-306-3065. Again, I'm sorry, that's 213-306-3065, 213-306-3065. When prompted, please enter code 249-534-46852. Again, the prompt code is 249-534.
He's so cool.
468-52#. Public comment will be limited to 2 minutes per item and a total of 5 minutes on all items. When calling in, please identify whether you are speaking on a specific item or on general public comment. Also, if you are following the meeting on your computer, please turn down the volume so that we don't get any feedback. At this point, I will turn it over to the board secretary for announcements and roll call.
Good morning. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Board of Water and Power Commissioners. Today is Tuesday, April 12th, 2022. This proceeding is broadcast on Channel 35. The exact broadcast times can be found by contacting Channel 35.
And would you take the roll?
President McCLAIN-HILL,
Present.
Vice President Reyes,
Present.
Commissioner BARAD Hopkins,
Present.
3 members present and a quorum. I will now turn it over to President McCLAIN-HILL.
Thank you. I do have just a couple of opening statements this morning. I first want to talk a little bit about extreme heat and about the urban tree canopy. This past week, I had the pleasure of attending 2 events in various parts of the city of Los Angeles. One out in the valley, an event sponsored by Pacoima Beautiful, where, among other things, the significant topic of concern was extreme heat and the fact that climate change, while we often continue to refer to as something that is on its way or something that is part of a distant future, it reminded me of its presence right here, right now, in parts of our city, where people are struggling to come to grips with things like extreme heat. Later, over the weekend, I had the privilege of attending the city's Arbor Day event in South LA, in Commissioner Hawkins-Dawson's district. And again, to hear constituents talk about the significance and importance of creating urban tree canopies for shade and as a direct response to climate change, and with the added benefit of additional neighborhood beautification. This department has invested a significant amount of resources into supporting the continued expansion of our and planting of trees throughout the city. But I am very interested in, and will be very interested in the upcoming weeks and months, in our specific plan to address issues related to temperature, particularly in those areas of our city where we have got vulnerable populations who have difficulty coping with high heats, who for any number of reasons, including affordability, are reluctant to use their air conditioning in the summer. We are losing more people, an increasing number of deaths associated with extreme heat. We talk about the impacts of climate change as it relates to water and as it relates to overall stress on our grid, but I'd like to see us begin to focus in very concrete ways to how we meet community concerns of our neighbors, many of whom live in the San Fernando Valley, but who are spread all across the city, who are going to have to be able to survive ever-increasing temperatures. Planting trees is a significant and important and targeted way of approaching these issues, but I'm also interested in other impacts on our system and our ability to deliver services. And so just wanted to say a little bit about that. In addition, I also want to say a little bit about as we continue to work on, think about, implement, and drive forward our own green agenda in response to climate change. We talk a lot about equity, we talk a lot about values, we talk a lot about jobs. Where the rubber meets the road is when those values are challenged. And there will be challenges, there will be pushback, and there are costs associated with all of those things. I want to affirm in a very significant way this department's commitment to this city's commitment to its values, and to indicate that we will be, let me speak for me, that I will be very, very, very opposed to compromising equity, compromising commitment to not just jobs, but to union jobs, compromising our commitment to building the most resilient and environmentally forward system that this nation has ever seen, but doing it means doing it right. And increasingly, there will be stress on our values. And those stresses may come, in the form of, gee, we could do it faster and cheaper if we abandoned our commitment to livable wages and to the union promise of a, of the kind of middle-class lifestyle that those jobs portend. It could be simpler and faster if we overlook or skim over our commitment to equity, to planning and investing in a way that everyone has access. None of these values are in conflict. In fact, they are all harmonious. And I look forward to our demonstration of how these practices align, and our steadfastness in standing up to those who would suggest that we do otherwise. So those are my opening comments for today. Is there anyone that has anything that they'd like to say before we move on? Okay, thank you. If we could go to first agenda item.
There are no callers for public comment. All public comment is now closed.
Terrific. Then we will move to, I don't have my...
Should be me.
Yes, I was going to say, I think the next would be our report from our general manager.
Thank you very much. I'll try to keep my report as brief as possible. We do have a short video that Brian Wilbur will show at the end regarding our Lyman Rodeo coming up. Briefly, we'll hear a report today about the snowpack and what the water future looks like for the state. But just to recap, we are worse off this time this year than we were last year. And there's a lot of things going on right now behind the scenes in Metropolitan Water District and with the state in terms of water allotment on the state water project. So, and some of those folks will be describing that in detail during their report, but it is becoming a very serious issue that we'll have to pay very close attention to in the next several weeks. Last week, we did honor our commercial customers with our 7th annual Sustainability Awards, and this is to honor folks who had made efforts to save water and power at their place of business. We had 4 categories: energy efficiency, water conservation, electrification of transportation, and demand response. And together, their actions drove about 5 million gallons of water per year of savings, or the equivalent of about 70 homes. They reduced enough CO2 emissions to take about 2,000 cars off the road. And so it's something that we've worked closely with our customers for several years now. It was a great chance for me to be together and have a guest speaker and to honor those companies that did that. Hopefully next year we'll be able to do it in person like we used to be able to do. So. Coming up on April 23rd, we have our Earth Day at Chatsworth Park, also known as Chatsworth. I say Chatsworth Park, that's a different place. I apologize. Chatsworth Reservoir, known as Chatsworth Nature Preserve. And so that's from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. At Chatsworth. Commission President, remember we were at Chatsworth with the Native American tribes celebrating the winter solstice that we were out there. And so this is a big event. We expect probably about 2,000 people to attend. Chatsworth is so large that you wouldn't even hardly notice there's 2,000 people there. It's a great property, great opportunity. We partner with a lot of nonprofit groups, nature groups, herpetology groups, other conservation organizations. So I'd like to encourage you all to go if you're in town and have the ability to go there, and as well as all of our employees and the customers as well. It's open to the public. It's free of charge. We also that day are celebrating an Earth Day in the Owens Valley with the 8th annual Owens River cleanup. And so we do a cleanup along with the folks in the Owens Valley to clean up the Owens River. We're also co-sponsoring an Owens Lake Bird Festival. This is done with the Friends of the Inyo, the County of Inyo, and Metabolic Studio. The Bird Festival is a annual event on Owens Lake because it's such an important migratory place for waterfowl. And so that'll be going on that time as well. President McCLAIN-HILL, you mentioned the Arbor Day celebration. Interestingly, we put about $2.4 million a year to plant about 40,000 trees. But to me, it's not enough. I totally agree. I've always thought this is an area that we should be doing more. I don't know the logistics of doing more because they certainly have to be established. But to me, getting more shade and shade trees, not only for the shade factor, but I think it's also a huge neighborhood improvement and brings equity to a lot of neighborhoods. So I am fully behind any ideas you'd like to pursue in that to increase that program. Lastly, today, for all our employees and their families as well, we have another COVID vaccination event. It's done in conjunction with IBW and St. John's Hospital. So that is going on from 8 to 3 o'clock today. And we're usually they're serving every brand of vaccine and boosters. So we encourage any employees who would like to take advantage of that to certainly do so. And your families are welcome as well. And lastly, I'd like to have Brian Wilbur give us a quick video about the Lyman's Rodeo coming up, and you want to tell us about the dates for that again, Brian?
Yeah. So real quickly, a few weeks ago we sent our teams, a journeyman team and 4 apprentices to the rodeo in Austin for the American Public Power Association. And it's just one of the 3 events that we do every year: the International Rodeo, the APPA Rodeo, and then our rodeo, which is coming up on May 14th. So in less than a month away, we'll go ahead and put this event. If I could play the video real quick of our guys in Austin.
Okay, so you're going to
So if you haven't been to one of the rodeos before, please come out on May 14th. It's going to be a great show here at our Truesdale training facility. This was our Austin group that went out for the last rodeo here. But it's a good time. It's very family friendly. We have a ton of stuff for the kids. It's a great event. It's a lot of fun. And it gives the guys a really chance to showcase their work. One of the things when we go out to this one specifically when it's all public power utilities, to really showcase what our guys can do and how well they are compared to a lot of the other utilities, right? We really have a top-notch training program here. They do a fantastic job. And it's one of the reasons that they're recruited out so much from the Water and Power group here for how well they do. So thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
I have a question. Is there an opportunity to recruit, or do we distribute flyers about DWP, our training classes?
Oh, yes, we do.
Okay.
Yes. So one of the major reasons why we do these events is to recruit. The downside is they also try to recruit from us. But we have a strong presence there where we talk to everybody on recruiting people from the outside to come to the department, especially at the APPA rodeo when you have a lot of public utilities. The benefits here at the department really shine, and it keeps them in a public utility, and so we do recruit very heavily while we're there.
Okay,
And
good to know.
we're also working to make sure we get as many high school kids and other people who might be interested in these jobs to be aware of the rodeo. Hopefully they'll come in as well. So.
Good. And women.
And women, absolutely. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. And I need to briefly turn the meeting back over to our city attorney with respect to public comment. And before he makes his additional announcement, I simply want to say that I look forward to the day when public comment can be done in person. And we are relieved of all of the technical glitches that make it more difficult for people to address this body. So with that, Mr. Brejovich.
Yes, continuing on the issue of technical glitches, I was advised that there was one. And so we will need to reopen public comment, and the call-in number is still the same, 213-306-3065. Again, 213-306-3065, but there is a different access code. That access code is 2486-836-9030. Again, that's 248-6836-9030. And what I would suggest, Madam President, is perhaps give people the opportunity to get on that line that we wait a few minutes before taking public comment. and then pick up public comment at the time you deem appropriate.
Okay, thank you so much. Then with that, we will move to introduction of motions for future consideration. I'm not aware of any motions at this time. Comments from our ratepayer advocate?
We'll have comments on a number of the management report discussion items, but no comments on any of the agenda items agendized for vote unless questions arise.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. I appreciate that. Do we have any neighborhood impact reports? Board Secretary.
There are no community impact statements or formal positions that were filed by any neighborhood councils on the items on today's agenda.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Then we are at item H, consideration of items recommended for approval. It's my understanding that the department would like to defer. Is it item 6? So we will defer item 6 for a future agenda. With that said, yes, sir. Oh, I'm sorry. Before we act on the actual items on the agenda, we will need to take public comment. So, why don't we move now? Is there anyone in the public comment line? While you are working on that, why don't we take a presentation which will allow folks to configure themselves and make sure that we have ample time for people to do public comment. And I'd like to start with that presentation number 2, actually, regarding drought updates, if that's okay. Mr. Collins, are we ready?
Good morning, Commissioners. I have been reporting at most of these board meetings. You know, we are facing the 3rd year of a drought, and we believe the situation is getting pretty dire. So today, I have the Director of Water Resources, David Pt.1, as well as Sabrina Sue, Manager in the Water Resources Division. They're going to provide you with an update, a presentation on what's going on with the water supply for this particular year.
Thank you so much. And for those of you who can remain social distance while presenting, you are certainly welcome to remove your mask while presenting. And what we often do is we'll have one at the back mic and one in the front. Yeah, that way if it's more comfortable to do it without your mask, please.
Very good. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you so very much for being here.
Well, thank you, Commissioner McCLAIN-HILL and Commissioners. We have a very quick presentation here for you on the drought update. It's about 15 slides. So why don't we get started? First slide. So this, on the left here, you see what it was like at the end of last year. The darker the red, the worse the drought. So pretty bad conditions in September of 21. After a couple of good storms, we got to February of this year and things had improved. But then we had the three driest months in the history of the state of California, and that brought us to March. And so that's the far right-hand side, and it's going to be, by the time we get to September, I imagine it'll be at least as dark as it was September of last year. So things are not good. Next slide. So the supply conditions, the state snowpack peaked early this year, and this may be an indication of things to come, some climate change issues potentially. On the left here, the State Water Project, the peak snowpack occurred actually in January. Usually it doesn't occur until April, but it occurred in January. We got our peak snowpack on the state side at 17.2 inches of water content. That was 61% of the April 1st normal, but by the time April 1st came around, that 61% was down to 26%. So huge runoff, huge melt off, but not a lot of associated runoff. LA Aqueduct, we experienced the same thing. We had a very early peak snowpack happen in January, but by the time we got to April 1st, that 66% we had in January had dwindled all the way down to where it is today at 22%. So not good on the LA Aqueduct either. Colorado River fared a little better. Their peak snowpack did occur close to April 1st, in March 18th at 91% of normal, and then by April 1st it had gone down just a little bit to 88%. Next slide. So what does all this mean for LA? We are dependent upon imported water supplies, both from the Colorado River and the State Water Project, especially during dry periods. And what I have boxed here in red is the last drought that we just came out of a few years ago. And you can see that mustard color in the middle. That's how much water we buy from the Metropolitan Water District. And it goes up dramatically during dry periods. So during the last drought, we were buying 60 to 70% of our water from Metropolitan. And you can see it's starting to occur. It occurred last year, it will occur again this year, so we're entering into another one of these periods. And the reason that's so important is because of that water that we buy from Metropolitan, the lion's share of it is State Water Project water. And the state system is really having a hard time. And this is the third consecutive dry year on the state system. The upper left-hand side, you can see the effects of climate change here. From 1980 through 2000, pretty low variability in the kind of weather patterns we saw. 2001 through 2011, increased variability, and now currently we're seeing some really wild volatility in what we're seeing as far as rainfall. And right now we're at 2022 where that question mark is, and we're at a 5% State Water Project allocation. That's only the third time that that's happened in the history of the State Water Project, and it's all happened since 2015. We've had 3 of those. In the old days, they said the State Water Project would never produce less than 10%. And here, just since 2015, we have 3 years where it's down to 5%. The two pictures on the right, the top one is San Luis Reservoir, the bottom one's Oroville, the 2 large reservoirs in the state. They're both 40% full. And the little histogram down in the bottom left is Metropolitan's access to their State Water Project storage, which is going down dramatically because when you don't have a lot of water flowing through the State Water Project California Aqueduct, it's hard to do exchanges of their water they have in storage. So it limits the amount of water they can bring south. Colorado River isn't that much better. Next slide. So the first ever shortage in the history of the Colorado River system was declared for 2022. And that's because Lake Mead dropped below 1075. It's currently down at 1061. And also Lake Powell is at critically low levels. It's down at such a low level that it's starting to hover around the minimum power pool. So this year, the Bureau of Reclamation is going to cut releases from Lake Powell into Lake Mead. What that means is the probability of shortage is going to go up. This year, of course, it's in shortage, but Metropolitan is not sharing in that shortage. But there's a 60% probability that starting in 2024, Metropolitan will start sharing in shortage, and that 60% probability of shortage sharing by Metropolitan is going to last all the way till 2026, and they may have to share up to 300,000 acre-feet of water. Next slide. So where we are today, this is just a little timeline of what's happened just since last year. As I said, 2020, 2021 were both dry. We're in the third consecutive dry year. The governor issued a notice in 2021 of a statewide drought emergency calling for a voluntary 15% conservation. December 1st, 2021, the Department of Water Resources issued its initial allocation of State Water Project water of 0. So that was a call to action. January 1st, that was the first ever Lower Colorado River Basin declaration of shortage by the Bureau, which I mentioned. January 4th, the State Water Resources Control Board adopted emergency regulations preventing wasteful uses of water. Thankfully, our ordinance already has all those in place, and we enforce those, so we were in compliance. January 20th, the DWR announced a pretty healthy allocation compared to what we have now. They said it would be 15%. And they said that there was only a 1% chance that it would go down, not up. Well, 2 months later, it did go down, not up. So we hit that 1%, and it's down at 5%. And what that means is there's only going to be 100,000 acre-feet of water coming into Southern California down the California Aqueduct this year. And in light of that, the governor 10 days later called for urban water suppliers to implement level 2 of their water conservation plans. Next slide. And this is our plan. And we are actually currently in level 2. So we were in compliance with what the governor called for. And I'll talk a little more about this plan here a little bit later. Met did respond to this, that the 5% State Water Project allocation is 100,000 acre feet to met, but it's insufficient to meet the demands of the member agencies that are dependent upon the State Water Project. We're one of those agencies, but there are others that are in the same situation we're in. There's the Cayugas Municipal Water District, the Las Virgenes Municipal Water District, the Inland Empire Utilities Agency, the Three Valleys Municipal Water District, and the Upper San Gabriel Valley Municipal Water District. So all these 5 agencies are the big users of State Water Project water in Met Service territory. There isn't enough water to go around. And so this 5% isn't going to last very long. And what we're going to end up with is we're going to end up under a health and safety supply allocation from the state to Southern California. And what they're going to allocate is 55 gallons per person per day.
You sound very calm, and so I'm getting lost.
Okay.
And the only reason I say that is if I'm at home and I'm listening to you, what does this mean to me? What, as a resident of Los Angeles, what am I dealing with? Because, you know, the number of acre feet tends to lose me a little bit if I'm a resident of Los Angeles, if I've got to translate this from the perspective of not just what's occurring in the world, but to the point of what does this mean for the people who are relying on us for water and power? What do they need to prepare for? You know, you've indicated just in this presentation thus far that the worst case scenario was not anticipated. In fact, at the time, just 2 months ago, that we received a 15% allocation, the idea that that would be cut was considered remote. Well, that's now occurred, which gives us a good sort of window into how volatile the situation is and how difficult it is to plan and to understand what's happening with climate. So,
Very good question.
help me.
Next slide, Sabrina. So this is our water conservation plan ordinance, and this is really the way we respond citywide. So our customers, this is what they have to do when we move up in the phases of our ordinance. So currently we're in phase 2. What this really means is that for our customers, they have to comply with all of the restrictions you see here in phase 1. So plus they have to comply with what's in phase 2. So currently we're asking our customers to make sure that if you're watering your property, that no water is running off your property. If you have any leaks in your system, it's mandated that you fix those leaks. If you have an irrigation system, it must be turned off 48 hours during a rainfall, plus 48 hours after that rainfall, it has to be turned off. You cannot hose down your driveways or any other hard surfaces. We don't allow washing of your vehicles with open hose. You have to have an automatic shutoff to that hose valve. And then you cannot water outdoors in the city of Los Angeles between the hours of 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. That's all in the restricted use ordinance. We are currently in phase 2, so above and beyond the things I just mentioned, our customers are limited to 3-day-a-week watering. And that's not like 3 days all day. It's 3 days a week, 8 minutes a station. So you can actually water your lawn in the city of Los Angeles no more than 24 minutes a week. So that's what we're asking our customers to do. And that's where we are currently. Now, in response to your question, President McCLAIN-HILL, we have other phases that we may have to go to. And phase 3 would be all the things that I previously mentioned, plus we would limit outdoor watering to 2 days a week. And then we would make some recommendations on the use of pool covers and commercial washing of your vehicle. And then if we go to phase 4, which is 1 day a week outdoor watering, which could happen, then all the phase 1 through 3 restrictions will be in place, plus you'll only be able to water outdoors 1 day a week, 8 minutes a station. The pool covers will be required, and you will have to wash your car at a commercial car wash facility that has a recirculation system on it, and they all do in LA now. And you will not be able to fill any directed fountains or pools or lakes with anything other than recycled water. And then if we have to, and it gets really bad, and we go to phase 5, then outdoor watering is completely prohibited in the city of Los Angeles. Now, this is all, to get back to a question you raised earlier about trees, you know, what's going to happen to trees and other things. We do allow hand watering of trees during all of these phases. So We're not requiring people to allow trees or other vegetation that you can keep alive with hand watering allowed. That's all allowed, but what we don't allow is the automatic sprinkler systems to go on and to stay on longer than what are in each of these phases. So we're currently at phase 2, but we could go to phase 3, 4, or 5.
I know that we have been very proud of the conservation efforts of the residents of the city of Los Angeles. Under phase 2 or phase 3, what would we expect in terms of a reduction in the utilization of water? I mean, we're not out there policing, these restrictions and don't have the capacity to do that. So I assume that we're looking at an aggregate drop in the consumption of water, and we've been tracking that over time. Are we looking for additional reductions in that consumption, and what are we trying to achieve with respect to these kinds of measures?
Yeah, good question. Sabrina, could you back up a couple of slides to the water shortage continues? Oh, here we go. So you'll see the shortage gap that we target with each of these phases. Currently, we're in phase 2. Rough justice, we use about 500,000 acre-feet of water a year in the city of Los Angeles. If we were to go up a couple of phases, say to phase 4, and we were at 1 day, hopefully we could cut another 10 to 20% out of that. So 10%, you'd end up saving 50,000 acre-feet, 20%, maybe 100,000 acre-feet. But to get to another point you made, we actually do have a pretty robust enforcement mechanism, and I'll get into that here in a couple of slides. But this is kind of gives you the scale of what we're trying to do. For each phase, we hope to save as much as 10% additional reduction in outdoor water use, in water use overall from each phase. So that's what we target with these phases.
And how are we communicating with our residents so that they are not surprised by, they're not just caught unaware? And I assume, although again, and I should probably know, but I don't, so, which means that there are a lot of people out there that don't know. I assume that do these phases also have implications for water rates? So is there, as a part of our enforcement mechanism, is there any increase associated with your utilization of water that is relative to or sensitive to the phases that we're in?
There is, but it's actually to your benefit to comply, because the way the water rates work, as you use less water, you'll go down in the tier. We have 4 tiers. You go down in your tier. That's one financial implication. So, and I have a slide that'll show you that.
But my question is, does the tier limit change or not relative to the phase that we're in?
No.
Okay.
But what does change is the penalties that you'll face with each tier. So if you are not in compliance, the severity of the fine increases as the severity of the tier increases. So currently, you're on a first offense based on where we're at now. It's at $200 for a first offense, and then it doubles and triples. And then as the phases go up, we add $100 to that. And so that's one way we get people's attention. We don't try to do that. We try to educate people as a first order of business, and 90+% of the time people are just unaware and they comply when our water conservation response crews go out and talk to them. If they don't comply, then they get fined. We also have a whole ordinance that deals with wasteful uses of water, and that's for the very highest tier water use customers that we have. Some of those customers get into tier 4 and they use a tremendous amount of water, and we essentially target the highest water users in the city. We put them on a budget. If they live within the budget, they don't get fined. If they continue to waste water, then they get fined pretty severely. And for instance, if you were into phase 5 and you were a highest tier water customer who was not complying with your budget, you could be fined up to $40,000 per month under that ordinance. So we have pretty restrictive water waste ordinances in the city now. So those are kind of the financial implications. I hope that kind of gets to some of your question.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I've been dominating
No, that's
this.
fine. That's fine.
Commissioner Reyes, did you have a question?
Yeah, just basically, we did have a very good campaign years ago on the Save the Drop, where you have, practical tips for our customers, like how, showering, brushing your teeth. So are those being communicated right now, again, in terms of outreach to our customers, just really giving them solid tips as to how they can conserve, because they need to put that, again, as part of their habits?
We do have a customer communications plan. There's a slide on this a little later, but
Okay.
we have been working pretty closely with Joe Romalo's group, the Corporate Strategy and Communications Group, and he's got a lot of really good informational items that we've been working on and getting out to raise awareness of the unprecedented drought conditions and the things that each customer can do and promote ways to save water. We have it in multilingual messaging strategies, and so Joe Romalo has been working with us closely on that. I think Joe is online.
He's here.
Look back.
He can probably answer more of these questions if you have them, but.
Do we have a timeline for that, when it will be, when it will hit and be strengthened?
Sure. Good morning, Commissioners. We actually completed a campaign, some of which is still running in the fall. When we were looking at actually a very wet December, there had been many agencies who weren't doing any communications at that time. We actually, with the support of Water Conservation and frankly their funds, spent $750,000 on getting out the word about our current phase, which is 3-day-a-week watering, as well as the restrictions, pushing paid social media, not just organic social media where you post, messaging direct to customers, not only about actions they can take, behavior changes now to comply with the restrictions that are in effect, but also the rebate programs that we have in place. So right now what we're doing is we're coordinating closely with MWD. I just met with their entire team last Friday to sequence their communications spend with ours as we find out more about what may come in terms of additional restrictions. So we're trying to time that up very closely with them. Some of our ads are still running, just so you know. We still have billboards up with 3-day-a-week watering because billboard companies leave them up. We'll be changing those out as we get closer into late May and into June. Our objective would be to hit this very heavy beginning in June, in addition to the regular communications that we do to encourage conservation. And it'll be two-pronged. On the one hand, we want to promote the heck out of our rebate programs because that's permanent savings. And on the behavior changes, we want to communicate about the drought emergency and the new rules, which we expect will potentially be in effect very soon with respect to days of the week watering, the other steps that Dave mentioned that are in the additional phases. I can answer additional questions if you'd like about the details of that program, but we are sequencing it up. MWD is about to make a very significant buy, and we want to back that up. We've also encouraged them to go ahead and share their messaging throughout the market, including in the city of LA, so we can maximize our spend because we're buying their water, so they're actually using our revenue to help make those advertising purchases as well.
Good to know. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Joe. Where were we? Should be on the slides. Back up.
A question while you're getting back to where you're restarting. Is there any special treatment of water use via drip irrigation or net FM?
Say that one more time.
Is there any special treatment of water use via drip irrigation or net FM, or is it treated like any other system?
Yeah, it's like any other system. So it's the same. So if it's above ground or underground, it's the same. All right. This is I think an important slide. It gives you a feel for a question you raised about enforcement, and this gives you an idea of where we've seen the most waste use complaints coming from in the city. So the red is the highest level of waste use complaints. The yellow is a little softer, and where you don't see yellow, that's where people are pretty much complying. Now, also on here, what I had staff do is put on all the underserved community areas in the city, and those are in the little small square boxes. And you'll notice that some of the best areas of water use efficiency and compliance are in the underserved communities. And so we have really tried to focus on some of the more affluent areas that are highest water use with our enforcement and our patrolling, because we found that the areas that are more underserved have a tendency to be more compliant as well. So the next slide. So these are some of the residential rebate programs that we offer. This is mirrored by our commercial rebate program, and we have a very robust offerings here. We've got pretty lucrative benefits that we offer people who want to do device-based conservation in their home, and this really helps, especially some of the more underserved areas of the city, to comply, because we give quite a bit of money out, $250 to replace your toilet, $500 to replace your washing machine. These were recently increased. The toilets are up from $150 just a short while ago. We used to offer $400 on the washing machines. Now we offer $500. We give out free devices, aerator, faucet shutoff valves for your kitchen and aeration, and then shower heads. And so we have a lot of things that we offer. $3 a square foot for your turf removal. Well, turf removal is easy for some to do. It's difficult for others, and so we added a new program. Next slide. And this is some additional services we offer for those customers who may want to replace their turf but have a hard time doing it because they have a barrier to overcome, which is they don't know how to redesign their landscape. And so we offer free turf replacement design services to those customers to help them overcome that barrier. And so through a combination of our education programs, our ordinances, our incentives, our free services, we've been able to see a decline in our water use, and this gets back to something President McCLAIN-HILL mentioned, over the last 15 years of 30%, just in the last 15 years. And if you go back further than that, if you go back to the early 80s, we use the same amount of water we used in the late 70s as we use today, and there are over 1 million more people living in LA. So we have had a real robust effort in water use efficiency and conservation.
Could you back that slide up again?
Yes.
Just back up to the previous slide. So if I'm looking at just the turf replacement,
yes.
Am I correct? Is that up to $15,000?
For $3 per square foot, up to 15,000 square feet, and you can get
5,000. Up to 5, so it's 5,000? Yeah, it's up to 5,000 square feet.
5,000 square feet, so you're correct, $15,000.
And the only reason that I'm pointing that out is that on your previous slide where you pointed out the high rate of compliance or sort of the high rate of, of compliance with the ordinance in communities that are underserved, I mean, what immediately popped into my head is because those communities have lots of asphalt. They don't have yards. There's not a lot of, they don't have pools. There's not a lot of high use, high water use amenities. And I just want us to be very mindful of that because, again, it goes back to investments in creating shade and tree canopies and things of that nature, because when you start to look at the investments that we make in order to assist communities that, have different impacts. So clearly, if you've got a major, redesign of your yard to do and having invested in a situation with a small yard, I know it can be expensive and you've got to hire someone to come out and do landscape design because, God forbid, how do you get all the color? And I mean, it's not an easy process. And I'm not being critical of that investment because, frankly, the results that are yielded by that investment are significant. We're in a desert. We have to have drought-tolerant plants. We can't be trying to keep grass green. But this is just one of those areas where, we're looking at, $250 to replace a toilet or $500 to replace a, clothes washer, as compared to $15,000 to replace a yard with, all of the concierge services that come along with that now being added on. And I just want to underscore that when we think about, the investments that we're making around the city, we've got to be clear about the need to tailor those investments to meet communities where they are. So I'd be interested in, and as Marty has suggested, I think that we really want to take a hard look at the kinds of investments we're making in other areas of the city in order to address, again, not necessarily, well, impacts related to drought, but also impacts related to temperature and other issues. So that was it just struck me, those two slides together, that those little boxes, I mean, I know those communities and there's a reason that they're compliant versus other areas where they've got a lot of investment to protect and a lot of habits to change and just more amenities that they've got to figure out how to service.
Can I chime in on that thought real quick?
Yes.
One of the other things interesting, so, we've talked about a lot in power because for power, we look at solar and equity for solar rooftops and that sort of thing. And, there's so many more customers in power than there are water because of all the multifamily residential usually has individual power meters with single water meters. And so, but what we've learned through looking at the power situation is over 60% of people in LA, they rent. So they may be in a house, a lot of times maybe a duplex or an apartment building, some kind of multifamily complex. So one of the issues always is how do you help folks that are in a residential setting, but it's not their residence per se. And in many cases, different than power, they don't pay the water bill. The landlord does. So it's always hard to try to figure how to change behavior. And we've looked at individual metering, sub-metering of apartments, very expensive to do and technically difficult. One of the things that we have been working hard with our apartment owners is on things like the low flush toilets and doing the commercial rebate programs to help them change fixtures out so that they can get the water savings. In a weird situation, it doesn't help the person who lives there because the bill is paid in conglomerate with their bill, but it does help the overall water use. And one of the things, like in the camera program that the board recently approved, is to provide more technical assistance for those multifamily building owners to not only, have power efficiency and insulation and better, heating and air conditioning and cooling and that sort of thing, but also water efficiency as well to help leverage that, because we know that a lot of folks in LA are in multifamily settings, and how to have a way for them to participate in water savings when they personally are not driven by the price of the bill. And so it's always been a challenge and something that we work very hard on our residential commercial programs to try to leverage that.
And I think our leak detection system or program helps,
Yes.
especially in disadvantaged communities where the homes are older, pipes are older. I think we should emphasize that in our campaign and our educational awareness so that then they could really try to figure out why they have a higher bill. It's because the pipes are leaking. So
Or you could have
encourage that.
Yeah, that or internal leaks in as well. And so it's a constant challenge is how to, it's like the situation we see on power, but different because there's a detachment from the bill itself, but you want to help drive behavior and make sure the appliances are installed for people to be as efficient as possible. So.
Well, I think just sort of following up on Commissioner Reyes' point, and again, also in recognition of how well LA residents have adapted, that it's very important to me that we really think about how we work with customers in a collaborative way. The communications piece becomes very critical, and it's not just about the money, it's about a scarce resource. And increasingly, people are coming to grips with the fragility of climate, with all of the various impacts, and are, I think, even more open to understanding that these are resources that are scarce and that need to be protected. And that we just go, above and beyond in terms of being creative about how we engage and entice people to work with us on solutions, which is, so I don't want to appear to be critical of any of the programs. I think that they're all important. I just want to make sure that we're thinking about how they're being deployed, that they're appropriate to each community setting, and that we're putting a lot of effort into partnering with Angelenos because this could get dramatically worse. And we just have to be cognizant of that and help prepare. It's one of those hope for the best, but prepare for the worst, so that in any respect, we are resilient as we wait on Operation Next to come forward and give us greater flexibility. But
a couple of things that Anselmo reminded me of that I overlooked was we have a couple of new things we're looking into. One is a flume device. It's a device that we put on your water meter that you can see what in real time, how much water you're using on your smartphone. And we're piloting that. We also have home water use reports that we've got it out to about 60,000 of our customers. We're planning on taking it across our entire service territory, and these water reports will give a customer a view of how they're doing as far as their water use efficiency compared to their neighbors. So people in their neighborhood who are very efficient with the use of water, who have similar landscapes and yards that they have, they'll be able to see how am I doing in comparison. And then we have other things that we're doing. You can see here, the primary effort of these water conservation crews, and these are the gentlemen who are out on the streets and ladies who are out on the street enforcing our ordinance, they are primarily educational, and they go out and they talk to the customer first before the customer is subject to a fine, and they try to educate them about what the ordinance is, where they may be violating the ordinance, how they can be in compliance with the ordinance, giving them some tips on what they can do. And then we're essentially trying to ramp up this enforcement effort, and it's going to have to be ramped up as the crisis grows. You'll have to ramp up enforcement because you're going to need to have more and more people out following up on reports of water waste.
Well, that was going to be my next question. So again, just kind of planning for what may be, I'd like to know that we are well down the road on that we have, plans in place, that we are preparing to scale, and that we, because these aren't faraway issues, right? These are very near-term issues, and our goal would be to be prepared and ready to deploy, and also to make sure that there is no unnecessary shock to the system as our customers begin to come to grips with what all this means.
And to that, Marty recently moved the Water Conservation Response Unit team back into the water system and gave us direction to start ramping it up. And so that's...
Back in the water system from where?
It had been in customer service for some time.
Okay.
It was a good move.
That's why I said thumbs up.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you, Marty, for that.
If I could comment, I think looking back from a few years, how many years ago it was?
He's usurping, isn't he?
I would say we have not had to issue many fines, but a few gets a lot of attention. I will tell you what got the most attention when we sent the letters to the highest 1% water users, and people were aghast. We had phone calls from almost everybody.
Well, I was going to suggest that as we, again, deploy strategies, that it certainly makes sense to look at the highest users and to make sure that they are engaged very early in a process so that they, rather than wait for them to get to violate and then be shocked, that they understand, as I said, what all of this means, because not everyone is glued to the newspaper or reading this particular section of the news or paying attention to what the governor is saying, that they understand what this means for them and what our expectations will be, and getting them prepared so that they're ready to meet these increasingly constrained tiers.
A big takeaway for us, just so you know, with this, in the last few years ago, we had the drought. a lot of folks, I mean, there's some really large properties in LA. It's hard for me personally to envision that, but there are multi-acre properties. But a lot of those folks don't live here. And they have people who manage the properties and accountants who pay their bills. And so the customer is actually very detached from the bill payment. And so we had someone dubbed the Wet Prince of Bel Air, and that, we spent a lot of time with that. We actually, that person and their staff had no idea what was going on until we worked with them. They reduced their water use by half. And so, so it is that outreach with customers, particularly because there are some very large customers who are not necessarily LA residents all the time. And so that makes it, those people make a huge dent in the overall water use. And so that's an important target for us.
Okay.
Sorry, Dave, go ahead.
Last slide. Next step. So just to give you a heads up on some things, today the Metropolitan Water District has an informational item on this very same subject where they're going to be talking about their next steps and whether they're going to implement some sort of a shortage restrictions on the State Water Project exclusive areas. We anticipate that their board may take action on that on the April 26th to implement an emergency water conservation plan, which could include limiting water days. It may include a gallons per person per day restriction as well, so we don't know exactly what it is. We anticipate making a recommendation to the mayor, and with council concurrence, the mayor would determine what phase of our ordinance we would go to. That's a mayoral determination. If the mayor was to make a proclamation on a higher phase of our water conservation ordinance, we would enforce that and implement it, and we would report to you on a monthly basis, at least, minimum on a monthly basis, on the progress in compliance with that proclamation. And then also we would report monthly to the mayor's water cabinet on that.
So are you teasing me? It says LADWP recommendation to mayor and council for higher conservation ordinance phase as a next step. So are you going to tell me what that recommendation is, or are you just, giving me a little kernel, a little morsel of information, and I can read it in the newspaper?
Well, in all honesty, it's Marty's decision.
We don't have an answer yet. That's the reality. We'll discuss it, and we want to discuss that openly, but there's part of this depends on what action Met takes and what the state does. And so we don't have enough information yet.
What are we considering?
Well, I think
we're a transparent body here.
So,
and so if you have it on the slide, I'm curious as to what's under consideration.
So I think it's pretty strong likelihood that we'll have to go to 2-day-a-week watering. That
would be phase 3?
That'd be the phase 3. And I will tell you, when we rewrote the ordinances, we tried to change the numbering because the phases would be nice if the numbers and the days matched. But so that would be 2-day-a-week water under phase 3. There will be a push from Met, we believe, to go to 1-day-a-week watering. There are challenges in my mind that we're putting, tremendous value of landscape at risk in areas that don't have enough watering. And if LA is supposed to take that step, I would expect every agency that also shares in the same water supply to take the same step, because LA is far and away ahead of other agencies in terms of conservation. And I think that needs to be recognized, that we have stepped up, our residents have stepped up and saved a tremendous amount of water, probably started water conservation before basically anybody else in California and maybe in the United States. And so I would look to see some real fairness with other agencies and water use before we agree to do anything that would harm our customers. I think 2-day-a-week is not unreasonable and can be managed and without a loss of, serious loss of landscape. But beyond that, I think that we have to take a real close look and also decide what areas of the city would be impacted. Would it be citywide or just areas that are really just isolated to that source of water? So there's some decisions, and I can tell you, that Nancy right now is at a Met board meeting, and they're talking about these very issues about how water gets allocated, and because it's us and particularly 2 other agencies, I guess also Inland Empire, so 3 other agencies, we want to make sure that everyone is playing by the same set of rules and playing to the extent that LA is playing before we do anything that is onerous on our customers. That's my position personally. And when we get a little more, we'll discuss it further and see if you're in agreement.
Thank you. That is, so just as I understand it, the expectation is that MWD will be implementing some new rules with respect to responding to the State Water Project allocation or decrease in allocation. And it is likely that again, in response to the same general set of issues that that the department would recommend to the mayor and the council, that the city actually increase or step up its ordinance level, which would further constrain the use of water, balanced against or with recognition of the extremely high level of conservation that's already been achieved by residents of LA, and a sense that that burden needs to be shifted or needs to be borne region-wide and not concentrated in LA.
Absolutely.
That's the current thinking about where we're likely to be. All of which is to be revisited as things continue to progress. But our best thinking right now is that's what we're looking at. Yeah. And, and again, I think it's just important that we speak out loud where we are, because people do have to begin to think about how they're going to respond to what's occurring. And so much of what's occurring in the physical environment are things that we don't control. Are there any other questions on this presentation?
Yes. When you talk about the phases, where does the street trees, where does that fit in?
So the phases would not affect watering of trees. So our plan is, if we have to restrict outdoor watering, that will allow, like I said, hand watering of trees, so that we can keep all the trees alive. And we've done that in past droughts, and to mitigate against any negative impact on trees.
If I could say, the other issue is also to work closely with Rec and Parks. They've done a lot to reduce their water use. We've partnered with them for years. They've done some turf reduction and Native California planting where there's turf that's not used for recreation. But to the Commissioner President's point earlier about communities that you may don't have a lot of fancy landscapes, those people need parks, and parks are important. And so there's a huge public investment in the value of the park that we need to not lose, as well as we need to keep that opportunity available. So we work extremely close with the Rec and Parks Department to make sure that that's not a loss to the city during that time. And they've reduced their water use by close to 50% citywide, I think, in the last decade. So.
But what you're saying is that we're still allowed to water our street trees with the hose.
Yeah.
Right, because I had someone come to my house who said I couldn't water the tree.
Really?
And to stop watering the street tree.
I hope they weren't an employee of the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power.
Well, in fact, they were.
Maybe maybe it didn't. They might have said maybe it's not needed necessarily, because once they're mature, they don't normally need water. So
no, it was a mature tree, and it was a nice looking tree. It was.
I hope it's still alive.
I was going to say, I hope it still is.
There's a lot of was words.
It's not so good looking now, but.
Well, we're here to tell you that you are free to water that tree or any other tree in the city.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So at this point, we will go back to the board secretary to take public comment. Is there public comment?
There are no callers for public comment. All public comment is now closed.
Thank you. And we will go back then to item H, consideration of items that have been recommended for approval. And with respect to those items, the ratepayer advocate has indicated that he has no comments. And we have withdrawn or deferred item 6. So is there a motion with respect to the remainder of the items on the calendar? I'm sorry, the remainder of the items on the agenda.
Commissioner, just for clarification, you would be recusing yourself from item 14.
So thank you for that. So we would be voting on items 1 through 5. We will be skipping 6 and then voting again on items 7 through 13.
And Commissioner, just to clarify, we'll have a little difficulty. We'll have to defer item 14 till the next board meeting because with your recusal, we won't have a quorum.
Okay. Is there a motion?
I move approval for items L1 to 5, L7 to L13.
Second, would you call the roll?
President McCLAIN-HILL.
Aye.
Vice President Reyes.
Aye.
Commissioner BARAD Hopkins.
Aye.
3 ayes. Motion's passed.
Terrific. Thank you for that. We'll go back to management presentations, and we can go now to item 1, which would be the presentation regarding our relationship with the Southern California Public Power Authority, also known as Scapa.
Good morning. So Scapa is a joint powers authority that was created 40 years ago to serve its members by creating generation and transmission projects and providing operational efficiencies and cost savings. Today's presentation will be an overview of Scapa and its services to LADWP. And presenting today will be Simon Zodu, our Director of Transmission Planning, Regulatory and Innovation Division.
Good morning, Commissioners. Presentation will be to provide an update on an overview of Southern California Public Power Authority's Scapa, shortly it's known as, services to LADWP. If I may, I would like to start with provide some background on some information that's very pertinent on the circumstances that led to the creation of Scapa. In 1973, oil supplies were cut off by the embargo by members of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, known as OPEC, and a state of emergency was declared here in the city of Los Angeles, and an energy curtailment was adopted to mandate industrial, commercial, and residential customers to reduce their energy consumption. In response to this crisis, Los Angeles adopted at the time an ambitious goal of reducing its dependence on oil. To do so, 2 of the many actions taken were initiating feasibility studies for the Intermountain Power Project and purchase of a share of the Palo Verde nuclear power project. So by the late 1970s, it became evident that the ratepayers of Los Angeles and other Southern California municipal utilities would not be able to finance the construction, acquisition of new generation and transmission facilities on their own. So as a result, in 1979, it was recommended that LADWP expedite the formation of a contractual relationship with other municipal utilities to gain the benefit of new financing techniques at the time and sharing of and developing of operating facilities. To that end, steps were taken to form what we know as a joint action agency to handle several projects. The same year, California state amended through its law through AB 1790 to allow the use of revenue bonds to finance generation and transmission projects. In 1980, the Department LADWP's Board of Commissioners and the LA City Council approved LADWP to lead the effort to form Scapa and to become a founding member. So following that, in 1981, Scapa purchased its first project with a 6% stake in the Palo Verde nuclear generation project. 40 years later, today, Scapa is within the top three joint action agencies in the nation. And in terms of energy supply, it serves more than 5 million Californians and 2 million customers. Scapa is a joint venture of 11 municipal utilities and one irrigation district, the Imperial Irrigation District. Shown in this slide are the two members of Scapa. The members are responsible for all costs, obligations, and liabilities and receive the benefits of Scapa.
Is there an allocation of cost?
I didn't hear that.
Is there an allocation of costs? So do the members bear cost equally, or is there a percentage allocation of cost?
Allocation is done based on a resolution passed by the Scapa board, and as well as administrative and general cost expenditures that are blended into the benefits that each utility receives.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's proportional, is that right? Correct.
Some of it, excuse me, some of it is proportional, some of it's based on, so there are a number of projects in Scapa. So if you're not in that project, you don't bear the costs that are related to that project. There are some general costs that relate to public benefit programs and other services that Scapa offers that are allocated based on your participation.
So I guess I just want to be just very transparent. I'm interested in what Scapa costs, how much of that cost is borne by the Department of Water and Power. Yes. So is that part of this presentation, or do we have that number?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes. Next slide is on the benefits of Scapa. Scapa basically provides a mechanism for joint planning, financing, construction, and maintenance of transmission and generation projects. Related to energy efficiency, in 2005, the Public Utilities Code, Section 9615, was adopted requiring all utilities to first include available energy efficiency and demand-side management reduction programs as part of their generation stack. Accordingly, Scapa supports all its members through the programs of energy efficiency and demand reduction until today. Scapa also promotes collaborative advocacy to support joint projects and to address some common challenges faced by public utilities. Last but not least, Scapa provides operational efficiencies and cost savings through economies of scale of joint procurement and low-cost financing. From LADWP's perspective, financing of projects through Scapa for renewables and other clean energy resources frees up borrowing capacity on its balance sheet for core infrastructure and power system reliability program work. And this basically removes some pressure for debt service coverage and preserves our debt capacity for future capital projects. This slide lists the various services available to Scapa members. They include various working groups, a robust training portfolio, contracts and agreements that are accessible, low-cost project debt financing, system operations and maintenance responsibilities, and renewable and energy storage procurement through power purchasing agreements.
So how many people are employed by Scapa? How large is their staff?
I would estimate there's about a dozen employees. The value of Scapa is it's largely member-driven, so it's the member staff that run working groups and do all the analysis. It's not Scapa that does it. It's members that are interested in those projects or programs. They do have staff that help coordinate, and they do have staff that help on the regulatory. They're the main face when we deal with the CEC and CARB and others for regulations related to public power.
No, I'm just, again, I'm just trying to understand the capacity of Scapa to provide to DWP certain quote-unquote services as they're articulated here. And again, I'm wanting to be very transparent. My concern really is around mission scope, because in my time on the board, I've seen a number of procurements move through Scapa that had nothing to do with, financing of projects or things of that nature. And I've become, I was always concerned. I've now become, hypersensitive to procurement practices that circumvent the department and that move through an entity that gives it some appearance of arm's distance, but that, may not provide the level of transparency or control, frankly, that the department should have with respect to procurement. So, and I'm very skeptical of, I'm curious about, so for instance, contracts and agreements. What does that mean? Is someone providing services to DWP? Scapa providing contracts and agreement services to DWP? And is it, low-cost project debt financing? I understand. But systems operation and maintenance responsibility, Scapa's doing that?
If I may respond to that.
Yes, sir.
The system maintenance and operations, the department is an operating agent on two of our transmission projects, the Southern Transmission System and the Mid-Atlanta. We do have full responsibility to maintain and operate those lines. So that responsibility flows into LADWP, but other utilities, if they want to be operating agent as well, they can participate. But for now, DWP has at least two projects that we are operating agents for. So Scapa plays a facilitation role, if you may. And once these projects are financed and operation can be overtaken by, elected by LADWP.
And then with respect to renewable and energy storage procurement, again, this agency of 12 is overseeing procurement for us. And then the project comes to us after they've done the due diligence. Is that the way this is working?
Correct. The power purchasing agreement will be signed by Scapa with the developers, and the LADWP will sign a power service agreement.
And who's doing the due diligence? Because I know what it takes on our end to do this work.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to understand as we delegate this to or outsource it to another entity, how we are ensuring on how this works, what the benefit of that is, or how that is preferable to due diligence being done internal.
I think we'll address those in subsequent slides.
Okay, I'll stop asking questions. Thank you.
Yeah. So moving on, I think we just want to, on subsequent slides, I will provide some summary or additional information on each of the services provided by Scapa. The first one is the working groups. Since the mid-1990s, the electric industry has experienced a lot of unprecedented restructuring and changes. To enhance value to its members, Scapa services have also evolved over the years. As a result, working groups representing the various functional areas of member utilities were created to address multiple industry challenges. So listed here are the 11 Scapa working groups. These provide a forum to discuss, collaborate on, and address essential and common utility practices and challenges. LADWP plays an active role in all these working groups. While we're talking about working groups, I would like to highlight one great example of a working group, which is a regulatory and legislative working group, which has done a very indispensable and valuable benefit to the department. The working group obtains a collaborative consensus amongst members on providing comments to regulation modifications and proposals. It coordinates meetings with appropriate agency staff, mostly State of California agency staff, to clarify and preempt regulation changes that may be unreasonable to public power. It ensures members are fully informed of their regulatory obligations and critical impacts. It also assists in helping members keep track of the multitude of regulations and review possible fixes in the future. This is done in collaboration with Scapa's office in Sacramento. And in addition to the working group also coordinates and provides regulatory perspective to the legislative group on upcoming legislation, and that could pose challenges from a regulation standpoint. So in the past, the working group has defended rules such as the California Air Resources Board cap and trade programs to support investments in our greenhouse gas reduction efforts. It has supported rules that maintained local control and decision-making on wildfire mitigation plans. And also, it has helped shape our renewable enforcement regulations regarding long-term procurement requirements with the California Energy Commission. The working group is still engaged in many proceedings at this time that are in progress that could be critical and impact our reliability in terms of planning. These include the implementation of the Senate Bill 100, the load management standards by the California Energy Commission, and CARB's Advanced Clean Fleet rules and scoping plan.
And are they significantly different from the Municipal Utilities Association, which also has exists for this kind of legislative engagement?
Primarily, the advocacy is related to municipal utility business and how we stand it as opposed to regulations.
Sometimes Southern California has a very different perspective from Northern California. And a perfect example is when they were implementing cap and trade. And in Southern California, a lot of our resources were fossil-based versus Northern California that were hydro-based. Mm-hmm. So depending on how those rules were implemented, it could have been very detrimental to Southern.
No, I understand, but the function is similar, correct?
Similar. CMUA is water also, whereas Scapa and NCPA.
I get it, but it's similar. It's essentially
yes.
From a legislative perspective, it's essentially a forum in which the various agencies are collaborating and presenting a common voice to these various regulatory bodies.
Correct, but CMUA often has differences, so they can't stake a position where it's unified throughout California. So it is another vehicle where you can get, 5 million residents.
No, I'm not suggesting that they're duplicative. I'm just saying that they're similar.
Similar, yes.
In terms of how they operate and how they're functioning in this space. And with respect to, say, going back, I said I was going to stop asking questions, so I'm going to stop. Go ahead. I'll let you continue.
CMUA doesn't do procurement, though. They're largely.
No, I understand that we get we get similar services without surrendering any control over any of our operational components. But go ahead.
Okay. Scapa also provides training relevant to industry topics. It hosts a lot of workshops facilitated by industry experts, and they have hired consultants in the past to provide important market updates to its members. Scapa Training Center was designed to provide Scapa members with a variety of customized, locally hosted training courses. Some of the advantages of Scapa's in-house training are cost savings for its members, increased collaboration, and member staff development. Classes include what's listed here in power system operations, finance-related professional development, and integration of new technologies and industry practices.
And is this all well, you have a slide on Scapa's funding somewhere?
Yes.
Okay.
Good. This slide is for services and professional service contracts that LADWP has participated in Scapa. The blue table lists the various users within LADWP of Scapa's service and professional service contracts and the corresponding expenditures in fiscal year 21 and 22. These are a total of 60 service and professional service contracts. The green table, on the other hand, shows the selection methods of such contracts. And I would like to note that under the sole source category, 13 out of the 25 contracts shown there, more than half, are for training services. And these are the expenditures for the past 2 years. Moving on, for renewable procurement, Scapa has a rolling or continuously advertised request for proposal process where members can identify opportunities to participate in renewable projects. Members can be the sole participant or share in projects to strategically leverage operational efficiencies and cost savings through joint procurement and financing of projects.
Is the financing and the procurement, are those tied?
Hi?
Tied, meaning in order to secure the benefit of financing projects, is there a requirement that the procurement be done through Scapa?
There's no requirement, but there are some savings derived from those.
Okay.
Yes. In terms of benefits for renewable procurement, Scapa provides outside expert in preparing some power purchasing agreement term sheets. It also provides consulting services to evaluate project finances and owner's representation on complex projects. Here is a list of projects. In terms of transmission and generation projects, Scapa has a total of 46 projects, and LADWP is a participant in 24 of those. LADWP participates in conventional projects such as transmission, as well as 19 renewable projects. Shown in the green table are the various types of Scapa renewable projects, and the table also shows a breakdown of the 19 renewable projects where LADWP is a participant. Renewable projects are organized under a power purchasing agreement, a mechanism as municipalities do not qualify for investment tax credits. Scapa has negotiated agreements to obtain the maximum benefit of these investment tax credits in the form of lower power purchasing agreement prices.
And again, you said 12 employees?
That's an estimate. I'm not sure exactly the number. We can get that.
15 to 20. It's been fluctuating, but less than 20, I would say. So by spreading among multiple project participants, Scapa has been successful in lowering project financing risk for the organizations and thereby lowering the debt service cost for the project participants. This slide shows a table that was 3 transmission and 1 generation Scapa projects and LADWP's share of those. They are the Palo Verde nuclear generating station, the Southern Transmission System, where Scapa issued a low-cost tax-exempt bond financing for cost of acquisition and construction of the 490 miles transmission line from Intermountain Power Project in Utah all the way through California. Also listed are the Mid-Adelanto Transmission and the Mid-Phoenix Transmission projects. The next 2 slides list in detail the 19 Scapa projects since 2007 where LADWP is a leading participant, and each project's corresponding renewable percentage towards LADWP's renewable portfolio. So on the second slide, you would see the Eland and the Red Cloud projects providing a significant amount of renewable percentages to LADWP's portfolio. This table summarizes the LADWP's various expenditures to Scapa. They range from memberships to training, services and professional services, and obligations to power purchasing agreements. Getting a membership through Scapa provides an advantage of cost savings. A lion's share of the listed membership that you see is allocated to the American Public Power Association, or APPA, and a relatively small amount is for the Smart Electric Power Alliance, or SEPA. SEPA helps electric utilities implement and deploy clean energy and distributed resources. So the summary, this is a summary of all the tables that were presented on earlier slides. In essence, Scapa has been and will continue to be an invaluable resource to the LADWP and its members in providing a series of critical services that translate into significant cost savings and also lowering of project financing risk. It provides a forum of collaboration and joint actions, professional development of staff through training, and an indispensable voice and advocate for public power in joint projects. From an advocacy standpoint, having this joint action or a joint utility public power coalition has been, and such as the one that Scapa is providing, has more weight and has positive results in influencing outcomes, and that has paid dividends for LADWP in the past, and it will continue. It continues to this day. The next slide is an item that you, Madam President, that you mentioned earlier, which is recently there were some developments and reports that made us look into how we can inject improvements into our processes, especially internal processes. Listed here are some potential measures for consideration to further increase transparency and improve accountability in the way we deal with Scapa. These measures are considered as opportunities to improve or for improving our internal processes and due diligence while continuing to receive services from Scapa. The first one is to process and to all contracts and for services and professional services through LADWP's supply chain services, for all contracts to go through our procurement process internally. In the event where the contracts or these professional service contracts are justified to be processed by Scapa, we are proposing that a pre-approval exemption be required by from three different offices within LADWP: the Director of Supply Chain Services, the respective Senior Assistant General Manager of the system requesting the service, and LADWP's Inspector General Office. Third, a neutral and third-party review and benchmarking of the existing utility-scale renewable procurement process through Scapa to be performed, so that we can benchmark and review the current process and see how we can improve it. Also, a quarterly high-level Scapa contracts and expenditures report to be provided. This will include approved exemptions as well, to be provided to the Water and Power Board of Commissioners on a quarterly basis, and an annual detailed expenditure report to be provided to the Water and Power Board of Commissioners. And for LADWP's representative on Scapa's board to be responsible for ensuring compliance with LADWP's board recommendations. So with that, we're very also, of course, we're very open to any additional recommendations that may come from the Water and Power Board of Commissioners. With that, I will conclude my presentation and would be very happy to answer your questions if you have any.
Are there any questions?
Would you safely say that LADWP bears the majority of what the expenses and the participation in the scope of work that Scapa is doing?
That's correct.
And are we, in terms of the budget for Scapa, how does that play out in terms of our role, and are we reimbursed in any shape or fashion, or we absorb some costs?
There are costs to all the services we receive from Scapa, but because of our scale and how large we are, the cost savings for us is much higher compared to other members. And Scapa has worked for the department in terms of cost savings. And at the region as well, I think LADWP has played a role in terms of working with other municipal utilities, especially from a power, a public power perspective. So In terms of budget, I think we can get additional data from Scapa in terms of the breakdown of LADWPs versus others and how much they contribute. But we pay for all the services that we get from Scapa. But at the same time,
I'd like to add, we have a Scapa office in the Financial Services Organization that provides accounting and does
You
the...
say we have a Scapa office, you mean
LADWP.
Scapa employees are here?
Well, they're DWP employees, and we get completely reimbursed from Scapa and the participants that are in those projects for...
Do we get reimbursed with our own money? Or do we get,
Well, we
when
pay
I say that, because if we're paying them and they give us money back, that's not getting
Let me let
reimbursed.
There is a SCAPA annual budget process, and they are audited by Moss Adams every year, so we can report back on how much of SCAPA billings are paid by LADWP versus the other 11 participants.
But I would assume that you have some order of magnitude. I mean, is it 50%? Is it 20%? Is it 70%?
I would assume it's at least 50% because we're much larger than any other participant in SCAPA. But it's really, I think, the benefits outweigh the costs. So, but we can definitely report back.
Well, and when you say the benefits, you really mean the financing benefits, correct? Because there's absolutely nothing else that's been presented that we can't do without them.
I think the financing benefits.
I mean, there's the financing benefits, and then there is the collaboration around regulatory legislative engagement. But I mean, everyone has a mutual interest in that. So those kinds of coalitions and collaborations are formed independent of the kind of delegations of authority that we've given to Scapa. And when I say mission creep, I mean, if I'm looking at contracts, we've got $55 million in professional contracts that would otherwise move through the department that are moving through Scapa. That seems like a pretty significant delegation of authority from this board, because that's essentially what's occurred. We've shifted review to Scapa of things that would otherwise happen here. And, training, these have nothing to do with why Scapa was originally formed, and even memberships in the APPA and SEPA paid through Scapa. I mean, we can pay our own memberships to these organizations, correct?
Yeah, I think it's based on the number of members, so if we include the entire region, I believe we get a break in the price.
How big a break?
I'm not sure about that.
Okay, but I'm just saying that, and then I also know that the administrative overhead is at some level borne by this department. I mean, it's just ludicrous if we're talking about an entity of 11,000 people, and if you just look at the size of our joint operations, so our internal services operations, or even just the size of FSO, to suggest that somehow this tiny, staffed entity is actually providing services and capacity to DWP, independent of the capacity to finance and to seek certain kinds of efficiencies with respect to bonds, et cetera. That is... so we have that balanced against the completely opaque nature of the operations. So once it gets to Scapa, we see it as a Scapa contract fully formed with, sort of assurances that everything's been done well and properly. And my confidence in those assurances have plummeted pretty significantly. I appreciate and will certainly chalk it up to the extreme competence and preparedness of the presenters, that there are good recommendations anticipating a number of concerns that the Commission should consider with respect to Scapa, including, things as basic as frequent reports on what's occurring. I would certainly like to consider, both with council and with others, other commissioners and our ratepayer advocate who may have some comments about this, how we proceed. But certainly these circumstances where we make up the lion's share of the financial participation and also other participation, and give up pretty significant controls in order for the benefit of others' collaboration is definitely something that I think bears a new look as we look at JPAs in generally. Did you have any other comments?
I would just like to see the scope be narrower to where it's absolutely needed, where that collaboration and that joint, contracts, because of the magnitude of the benefits that it will bring to us. Whereas we're talking about, say, training, there's minimal. We can do that ourselves, and really to look at the future where we could make a difference, and Scapa could make a difference in terms of our infrastructure work, for example. So just revisiting it from time to time as to the scope of the work that's there, and probably, assessing where it's most meaningful and where we can get the most bang for our buck, because we are a majority of the participation in Scapa.
Commissioner Barad Hopkins?
As I remember from being at that conference, was it 2 years ago, in New Orleans, that most of the people there were members of boards that were either power or water. That we were one of the few that combined water and power.
Yeah, everybody else there would have been power. Some would have water, but the majority of those would be power.
Would be power, yeah.
Dr. Pickle, did you have any comments on this presentation?
Yes. First, a historical comment. Starting in the 1930s, the electric business had grown to a scale where people were starting to sell wholesale power between each other and adding transmission to do so. And with that, generation grew in scale. And the industry moved toward joint ventures as a way of addressing the financial risks of these major projects. And that continues to this day. And Scapa is clearly an entity that's trying to created to reduce those costs of financing and creating those joint ventures for Southern California entities. And it's good to have a team that's very experienced in that, although I think one of the more spectacular joint ventures is the Intermountain Power Project that has involved a joint agreement of more than 35 or more parties. So that component is important. If you look at, I was busily trying to add up the population of the various member cities, and as I quickly tried to do that, I had a question for Reiko. Does the City of Riverside utilities just serve the City of Riverside?
Correct.
Okay, so as I tried to count out the bigger cities, I came up with a total population of 1.3 million. Compared to City of LA's 4 million. So it's a little bit like what I call elephant and rabbit stew. There's some good sized rabbits here, but then again, there's a really tiny rabbit, the unusual city of Vernon, exceptional in many ways with a total population of 112. And so, I see some areas of savings are very small. potential because they're just small expenditures to begin with. The joint expenditures on APPA, the training, they're small expenditures. I see how they benefit the other members far more than they would benefit us. But as soon as we get into the renewables procurements, we can get, there's a standardized way of getting people on board. The question, the biggest problem I have with some of that is the transparency in the process. And so I think moves toward greater transparency on that, in that process is more important. Especially now, given the commercial nature, some of it has to be confidential while under negotiation, but I think it's important that a broader range of people within the organization, including board members, treat these like real estate transactions that in many cases they are, and have that so that's more visible. Camden, do you have anything else that would be appropriate to add? So those are my comments.
Thank you for that. I appreciate any other questions and comments or comments about this?
Just one comment. All of the PPAs and purchase power agreements and all the financing does come to the board and city council, and we can provide all the resolutions in the past. It never went past this board or the city council. And even some of the large expenditures under efficiency, I think that may have also come to the board for approval before Scapa took on. So one of the things we could report back on is which of these expenditures did we have board resolutions associated with them, allowing us to use Scapa as the process?
No, I appreciate that. And again, it's not a critique necessarily of what's, well, maybe it is. I think that there's process and there's substance. And understanding what it is we're trying to achieve in every instance becomes really critical, and things change over time. So one of the things that I'm pretty clear about is that the level and degree and the nature of our utilization of Scapa has changed significantly over time, and that needs to be revisited and narrowed. In addition to that, just as a board member, I do have some real concerns about some of the significant work done around purchase power agreements and the level at which the department is leading the diligence and the review on the front end of those agreements, as opposed to them coming to this board fully negotiated with some assurance that all of that's been competently handled via Scapa. I am loath to believe that the expertise at this department and the benefit of having one's own counsel who is responsible to and whose fiduciary relationship is to this department is somehow outweighed by a process which puts Scapa front and center. So in my view, reversing that process so that it's significantly vetted by the department and moves to Scapa at the point of financing might be a more appropriate way to proceed. And then quite frankly, Scapa has been used as a place to circumvent procurement, just, you know, plain and simple. And that is simply not an appropriate use of Scapa. I will be interested in a follow-up report that breaks down the Scapa budget and the DWP's, LADWP's contribution to that budget, both in terms of hard dollars, also in terms of services provided. And while we do get significant, I suspect, financing benefit, I would certainly imagine that Wall Street is not easily or blind to obligations that this department has through Scapa. So those numbers are counted as our overall credit worthiness is being thought through because, there's nothing there to back it up except the department's commitment. So, we have to just be transparent about that as well. And I look forward to continuing this review and working with some internal resources in council. Will certainly be back with a motion to move forward some of the recommendations and others. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the presentation. It was very thorough and very easy to understand.
Thank you.
It's noon. Is it possible can we take a, I'm sorry, a break?
I thought it was like 5 o'clock at night.
So, yeah, we're already at noon. Why don't we take a 30-minute break and come back so that.
What should we do then? What should we do during our break?
We could do lunch and come back. I think if that works. Will we maintain our quorum if we break for that long?
Yeah.
Okay. Then we'll be in recess for 30 minutes.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Reggie, will you let us know when the mics are down?
Please
Stand by.
maintain silence until all mics are turned. Please maintain silence until the meeting begins.
Knew it.
Madam President, we are recording.
This meeting is being recorded.
We are back from recess, first, Madam, our Board Secretary, would you please take the roll?
President McCLAIN-HILL.
Present.
Vice President Reyes.
Present.
Commissioner BARAD Hopkins.
Present.
3 members and a quorum.
Thank you. And our next presentation is the 2022 Power Strategic Long-Term Resource Plan Update. And while the presenters are coming to the mic, I have two announcements that I'd like to make, one of which I should have made at the top of the meeting, and the other is hot off the presses. So first and foremost, there's a new voice and a new presence at our board meeting, and that is our brand new board secretary. I'd like to welcome her to the commission, Shantae Mitchell. Been doing a magnificent job for your very first board meeting, actually a magnificent job in general.
Thank you.
And then hot off the presses, we have a departure, which we will more fully recognize at our next board meeting, but it has been announced now that our very own Board of Commission Vice President, SUSANA Reyes, will become a member of the Board of Public Works. So we'll be leaving the Department of Water and Power and leaving our commission, a loss for which I am just tragically disturbed, but joining, staying within the city family, going to the Board of Public Works, where she will be extraordinarily helpful on all of our initiatives, and in particular, I think, given her focus on sanitation, our initiatives with respect to Operation Next. So those are our presentation, and sir.
Thank you. Jason wanted to have a few words.
Yes, thanks, James. So I wanted to just share an award that we recently received that's related to this presentation. Reiko, thank you for obliging. In the past, we get awards, we recognize them internally, and we're really proud of them. But this one in particular, I thought really deserved to have the attention of our board and to be discussed and have the folks that were involved in this recognized publicly. This is an award that was given to our power system and to Institute. So you hear EPRI often. That's an organization that was set up in 1965 following a regional blackout in the northeastern United States that took 30 million customers off of power. And that entity was set up to ensure that there was research and scientific grounding in the electric industry with EPRI on studies. One of those studies we won an award for, and that study is called the Climate Assessment and Transmission Resilience Analysis. So what this analysis did is it looked at various climate impacts such as precipitation, temperature, sea level rise, drought, and importantly, wildfire. And I think a number of us remember here back in 2019 when the Saddle Ridge Fire had a very extraordinary impact on our power system that really went largely under the radar, and I'll talk why it went under the radar in just a quick second. Prior to the Saddle Ridge Fire, there was an announcement from the mayor to not repower our ocean-cooled units. And it was up to our power